Good morning. I am your host, Jennifer Purcell. Living with a Visible Learning Challenge is the name of this podcast. And today we will discuss the challenges and triumphs of those who are neurodivergent living in a neurotypical world that was built for neurotypicals, not neurodivergence. And I hope that this podcast will not only open up your eyes to the challenges that neurodivergents have, but also the ones that maybe neurotypicals have that we can share with you, even if you're not neurodivergent. And also, I have interviews on here with neurodivergent advocates and also with neurotypicals that work with neurodivergence to see how we can interact with each other and how we can embrace our differences and similarities and try to understand each other and come to common grounds and be able to, just kind of help each other live a more harmonious and easier life. And so today's episode is going to be about what it is like to read a book when you have NLD. I have all of these problems still. So, do you find yourself skipping lines when trying to read a book or have challenges with not feeling tired after reading a lot at once? Do you find that sometimes it's hard to understand what you just read? And if you noticed, I actually started that script reading it wrong because I wanted to show you some problems I have. Even though I don't read academically anymore for school, I still have these problems since I graduated 6 years ago from college. I do find myself skipping lines when I read unless I use my finger underneath the lines so that I don't skip them, or I use my mouse to follow along, or I scroll down as I finish each sentence or line. That helps me not lose my place on the computer screen. I also find myself feeling tired after reading a long article. It sometimes is hard for me to understand what I read, especially if I read it too quickly or have a bad migraine while reading it. I know I prefer to listen to audiobooks than reading a physical book because I can remember it better since my auditory memory is quite good, and it's more enjoyable to hear it in the author's voice too. Also, it's easier to keep track of where you left off in an audiobook than in the app Audible keeps tracks for you. I remember that I had to go to my GSI's office hours quite a bit to ask him questions about what we read for the lectures because it wasn't easy for me to understand, especially with the sociology terminology, Old English, or weird writing that was being used by the authors. He was very good at helping me understand the passages, and I would record his explanations so I could refer back to them later when writing papers on those authors. This helped me get through the difficult parts of writing those papers for my sociology classes in college. Also, my mom helped me with writing and proofreading my papers for me in college. And my GSI Alex also helped me with improving my drafts so that they could sound better and be better and have the right material in them for the authors and assignments. So let's explore what challenges other neurodivergents have with reading, whether it is for school, work, or pleasure. But before I do that, I wanted to let you know that I am an ambassador for the NVLD project, and as an ambassador, I do share with them these podcast episodes, and they use them as blogs for their website and for They also do research on NVLD, and they also are working with the Columbia University in New York and are doing that to try to get NVLD back on the DSM. And I believe they have renamed it NVLD to developmental visual spatial disorder in order to have it be in the DSM. They have to do more research and be able to have more evidence on it and be able to have that evidence be sound and, show what NVLD or developmental visual spatial disorder is, and to, show examples of it so that it's easier to define and it's easier to get people the accommodations and help that they need in real life. So the first article is titled Advice for Reading Comprehension at Home by Bob Cunningham, written in January 11th of 2016. Quote, Elizabeth Shorey, who has an MED, is accredited neuropsychologist, clinical psychologist, speaker, and author who has over 25 years of experience working in the Canadian health and educational sectors as well as with Canada's First Nation communities. Although NVLD students usually have excellent decoding or basic reading skills, they often have difficulty with reading accuracy, particularly when reading sight words. That is, they often misread or guess the word. Tracking issues, unintentionally skipping lines or words are common. Reading comprehension is often weak due to poor inferential reasoning skills. Hence, they have a preference for factually based books rather than fictional books. Written language is another common area of challenge. Letter and or number reversals and poor handwriting, letter formation are present. Weaknesses in visual organization often surface as difficulty writing on the line, writing to the margin, and knowing where to write the date, name, and where to start writing their essay. Spacing between letters and words and the size of letters are often inconsistent, and VLD students almost always prefer to print as cursive writing is so often difficult to master. They have difficulty with punctuation, capitalization, despite repeated attempts at teaching and reminding them of these rules. So I can actually really relate to that quote because I remember when I was in elementary school, my parents got me these bigger pencils that were easier for me to hold. And that was before I knew I had NLD because I wasn't diagnosed with NLD until college. And I also remember writing really big letters and not really having enough space on the paper to finish my sentences sometimes. So they would break in kind of weird places. And I remember I still sometimes do this. I sometimes flip-flop letters when I type or when I write words. And I do have poor handwriting. That's why I prefer to type, actually. And I also quite a lot of times have problem with just writing really fast. That's why typing's easier for me. I mean, I'm a millennial, so I grew up around the computer and around iPhones, so it's kind of easier just to type rather than handwrite most of the time. And I do print. I don't use cursive unless I'm signing a check. And one other thing that I thought was kind of interesting about this article is that they said that NVLD students prefer factual books over fiction books, which is weird because I'm actually the opposite. I like fictional books. I don't really like reading facts. I mean, I do enjoy history books, but I like the imagination books and then fantasy books more than nonfiction. Um, so the second article I want to use is titled Advice for Reading Comprehension at Home by Bob Cunningham, expert advisor, head of school at the Robert Louis Stevenson School. Quote, I've always found it ironic that a child with a nonverbal learning disability can have such difficulty with reading comprehension. Some other time, I'll talk about why the nonverbal part of the learning disability or learning difference label doesn't quite capture the difficulties these kids have. Today, though, I want to offer some advice that can be used in school or at home for working on those reading comprehension issues. Reading usually comes easily early on for kids with NBLD. They have no trouble with phonics. They develop strong vocabularies and they have a very great memory for details. This lets them get far into elementary school and often even into middle school before any reading troubles emerges. But when difficulties surface, they can be a really big blow because your child and parents have always thought of reading as an area of strength. Expectations for reading change. Questions become more abstract, recalling specific details become less significant, and recognizing themes and themes not explicitly stated, like the main idea, characters, motivations, and types of conflict, becomes essential. The need to know the what and even the how is superseded by the consideration of the ambiguous why. A common way to think of this shift is reading is that it is no longer enough to see the individual trees. You also have to see the whole forest because seeing the big picture or forest does not come naturally to kids with NVLD. This is a critical area that needs to be scaffolded for them by teachers and parents. So here are 4 ideas to try. Select nonfiction because it's more likely to grab your child's interest, but focus your discussion on the people or other characters in the book. Ask the same questions you would about characters in a novel. Avoid visualization strategies for important things to remember. Which place demands areas of weakness in favor of root language strategies that access cognitive strengths. Try phonemic devices, rhymes, and lists. Try to help with identification and understanding the main idea. Show your child how to build a case. In other words, work from the trees to the forest to build a bigger picture. After each section of the book or each session of reading, give specific suggestions for how to talk about the book with other kids and with adults. Practice what your child can say to engage others in conversation about what's been reading. So for that article, um, I think those ideas are really good suggestions. And I'm chuckling because it talks about trees and forests, and that makes me think about um, a tool that my mom came up with in college when we were trying to um, do these little short paragraph analysis of a sentence from a reading I would do for sociology. We would use what we called the stairs of logic. And we would use that to try to basically build a good paragraph that would um, basically decode the meaning behind that sentence in the reading and try to support it with good sentences and good structure and good flow and good grammar and good fluff and in a way that made sense and sounded good with reason and logic. And we worked with the trees and then the ladybugs and then the leaves and then so forth. So this article reminded me of that kind of technique that my mom came up with for me in college. That was kind of cute. Okay, the next article is titled Five Confusing Signs of Nonverbal Learning Disabilities by the Understood Team Expert, reviewed by Sheldon H. Horwitz, ED. Quote, strong reading and spelling, but poor comprehension kids with NBLD are often very good readers. They're strong at decoding, sounding out letters and words, and word recognition, reading words by sight without sounding them out. They're usually good at spelling and reading out loud, but they often have trouble with reading comprehension and with holding on to the meaning of what they just read. They may struggle to understand the moral of a story, and they may have a hard time picking out important details even in a simple passage. So I completely understand that article because I remember when I was in high school and middle school, I had a lot of Shakespeare to read, and I did not like reading Shakespeare because it was very hard to understand the old medieval English that they would use. But when I used SparkNotes and they would transcribe the English into Old English into modern English, it was easier for me to understand it, and it would say what that sentence meant. For me, it was like, oh, okay, now I can actually kind of enjoy reading this because it's easier for me to understand what I'm reading. And it's easier for me to kind of get what the meaning is between the lines. And not that I actually enjoyed what I was reading, but it was easier. It was a more enjoyable process because I wasn't getting so easily frustrated of just trying to read one sentence or one word, like the, you know what I mean. The last article is titled Strategies for Success for the Student with a Nonverbal Learning Disorder by Dr. Emily Levy. Originally published in Spin's Winter 2006. And I've actually interviewed Emily, Dr. Emily Levy. I think I'm saying her last name right. Sorry if I did not. A couple times. And the first time I did it with just her, and the second time I did it with her and her daughter. And I'm not going to spoil that one that much because I haven't produced that episode yet, but I think you guys will enjoy that one. And so this article says students with nonverbal learning disorders often excel at decoding but struggle with reading comprehension, missing the overall big picture, and having difficulties with visualization and inference. To improve their comprehension and inference skills, a multi-step strategy is recommended. This involves identifying and highlighting the topic in blue, the main idea in green, and the important details in yellow of a passage. Additionally, students should summarize the passage in their own words. For answering comprehension questions, students should distinguish between explicit, directly stated, and implicit, inferred questions, marking them accordingly to help focus their reading and inferential skills. Excuse me. So, those are actually some really good tips from Dr. Emily Levy because she is a tutor for students with special needs, and she's got that right for people with NBLD, that highlighting is good to do. And I would have the teachers teach them how to highlight, because I know for me, maybe this is not true for everybody with NBLD, but I used to not know what to highlight. I would highlight everything when I would read. So if you teach somebody what they need to highlight, what is actually the topic that they need to highlight, and what is the main idea, and the important details, then it'll be easier for them to do that on their own, and it'll be easier for them to decode that and remember that. So that would be one thing I would add to that. So I hope that this episode was helpful for you for pointing out some areas where it's hard for people who are neurodivergent to read a book and for reading comprehension. And, this can also apply for people with dyslexia, ADHD, on the autism spectrum, and other learning differences as well, and actually probably some neurotypicals as well, who maybe are just slower at reading. So hopefully what you can do with these episodes on this podcast, Living with Invisible Learning Challenge, I would like to challenge you to journal about the episodes and just see what you learn from them. Or you can share about the episodes with your friends and family and see what they can learn from them. And as always, I will post the links to the articles that I use in the description of the podcasts. And please let me know if you know somebody who you think would want to be interviewed on this podcast, or if you yourself would want to be interviewed. Please email me. I have my email on my website, and I also have it pretty accessible on Facebook and Instagram through messaging as well. So you can get in contact with me in those ways.